Always, and that epitomizes really what we do here at HLN. News and views, everyone giving their opinion, and we have experts, you the viewers, you chime in our blog, our Facebook pages, as we await. It's an exciting day. We could get a verdict today. Let's get our experts in on this. Ann Fitz, Michael Barnes, both have done a tremendous job throughout this trial, providing insight. Michael Barnes, drug policy advisor as well. So let me get your take, Michael. Do you think, number one, we get a verdict today, and number two, who did the better job yesterday in closing, given the jury that one last thing to think about?
I do think it's possible that there could be a verdict today. I agree with the assessment that there's a heavy motivation of the jurors to get the case done and over and done with today, given that it's a Friday, so they can have a weekend to relax, not have this hanging over their heads, and start their week Monday back to normal. As far as who did better yesterday, I have to say that I would give Chernoff major points for being bold. I don't necessarily know that that was positive and it benefited his client, but he was absolutely bold, and he gets credit for that. I mean, from the very beginning, Ed Chernoff has been very committed to this case. He took the California bar exam, which I think is a 3-day exam, and I've taken one bar exam and sworn off all others in the future. So I admire his willingness to do so for his client, but he went really far yesterday. I mean, he went so far as to overtly and openly blame the victim. And then he sort of contradicted himself and protected the victim by saying it was offensive that they used the analogy of a baby on the countertop. But all in all, I thought he was the bolder of the two attorneys in the room, and I don't know whether it's going to work to his favor.
Let's listen to that real quick. Guys, let's listen to, and it was the refrain from Ed Chernoff. That the prosecution is asking you, the jury, to convict Conrad Murray based on the actions of Michael Jackson. I believe we have that cut. Let's listen to that, and we'll get Ann in on the conversation.
What they're really asking you to do, just say it. What they're really asking you to do is to convict Dr. Murray for the actions of Michael Jackson.
There it is in a nutshell, and that was his refrain. The first refrain from David Walgren was that Conrad Murray's putting Conrad Murray first. But we're on Ed Chernoff. Let's talk about him. Did you think he did a good job with that line of that you're trying to blame Murray for what Michael Jackson did?
Me?
Yes, you are.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I think that he did a good job, but I was a little disappointed with the way that he followed through with that, because I think that he kind of got his foot in the door, started with his Michael Jackson saying that there's no perfect villain and there's no perfect victim, and I think that that was a good introduction, and I really wanted to see him go down that road of this was not just anybody, this was an extraordinary victim that we had in this case, and that explains, in part at least, Dr. Murray's actions, and I really wanted to see that from Chernoff, and he didn't deliver on that part. But stylistically, I agree with Michael Barnes that he did a better job than Walgren did, at least with Walgren's opening. Now, I think when he came back and did his rebuttal, he hit a couple solid points there, and I was happy to see that. But I really liked the way that Chernoff presented his closing argument.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Chernoff needed to do something different, and I thought it played to his style. It was a little more homespun. He was in front of that jury. And he talked, it was, Michael, it was layman terminology of, come on, elephant in the room. We wouldn't even be here if it's not, we're talking about Michael Jackson. I think those are just that kind of common speak as compared to all the science we heard. I think obviously that's registering somewhat with a jury.
Yes, but I do think it was risky the way Chernoff approached his statements yesterday, because he did so overtly blame the victim, and then he, as I mentioned, he contradicted himself and had tried to then come up and stand up for Michael Jackson, saying how offensive it was that they used the countertop analogy. I think it could work to his disadvantage. I mean, I used the word bold, but I didn't necessarily use it in the positive sense, because I think he could have done a better job at balancing the need to prevent from demonizing Michael Jackson while still making this about the facts and creating a strong case, as strong as it could be with these facts, for the benefit of his client. So all in all, I do think there was a risk that Ed Chernoff turned off the jury yesterday.
Potentially 6 of the 12 Michael Jackson fans. You always got to wonder and be concerned about walking that line and going too far and blaming Michael Jackson, who ended up dead. Real quick, and I agree with Ann's point, I thought David Walgren brought it home in his 23-minute rebuttal, and it seemed the refrain there was, oh, poor Conrad Murray. And it's like, Michael Jackson's dead. What do you mean, poor Conrad Murray? Let's listen to that.
Poor Conrad Murray. Everyone is just working against him. They blame Alyssa Fleek. They blame Alberto Alvarez. They blame Dr. Schaefer. They blame Kai Chase. They blame AEG. They blame Randy Phillips, Michael Amir Williams, Fahim Muhammad, Arnold Klein. Everybody but Conrad Murray. Poor Conrad Murray.
So that was very effective. He went even as far as to say, Ann, that if they had a chance, they might have even blamed Michael's son, Prince. Yeah. That's going maybe a little too far, but I'm sure it got the point home.
Right, and then he followed up by saying specifically, Conrad Murray brought it into the house, the propofol. He administered the propofol. He abandoned his patient. He failed to have the monitoring equipment and resuscitation equipment and backup personnel, and he failed to call 911. At the end of the day, looking at everything, no matter what you have to say about Michael Jackson, Conrad Murray administered the propofol when everybody else said they never would have touched it with a 10-foot pole.
There it is. And it gets back to those basic legal principles. And you guys, if I go too far afield, especially when you see Michael Jackson rehearse. If it were not for the actions of Conrad Murray, Michael Jackson is still performing for all of his fans to see, if it not were, but for the actions of Conrad Murray. That's what the prosecution hopes that jury takes into that deliberation room. The jury will deliberate today. We may have a verdict today. HLN on... Barnes, you ever heard of that? A 2-hour, once we know there's a verdict, I guess it's Los Angeles, and I guess you got to work in that traffic that folks could battle just to make sure everybody's there for the verdict, which, again, could come down today.
The traffic in Los Angeles, they always want to make sure that the media are included. And, of course, you know, that makes a big difference to us. I mean, Judge Pastor has done a really good job at making sure that the public gets an opportunity to hear the facts in this case. But he's also balanced the interest of making sure that the trial is fair. So I think the two hours might just be for our benefit.
Gotcha. And Fitz, as we look at this jury, again, 12... All right, again, thanks to my colleague Vinny Politan laying out that timeline. Again, we're on Verdict Watch here at HLN. We have our experts with us, Michael Barnes, attorney, drug policy advisor, and Fitz, criminal defense attorney as well. Michael, you know, we use the word timeline. It's like there are so many timelines. Number one, that a jury could be dealing with. But let's talk about what Vinny was dealing with, the timeline of drugs given. That's really what you deal with as drug policy advisor. What do you think the jury's doing with that? That Dr. Murray timeline, and he gave him 25 milligrams of propofol at 10:40, then what?
The jury is either paying close attention to that, and primarily from the defense's perspective, or it's completely disregarding it, because it can take really two ways in assessing the facts of this case. It can follow the notion that the question in this case is whether or not there was self-administration of propofol and there was self-administration of the other benzodiazepines that ultimately led to immediate death of Michael Jackson, or they can follow the approach of the prosecution's theory, looking at the experts for the prosecution, and consider the greater standard of care, bringing these medications into the home of Michael Jackson where their children, someone who had previously potentially had addiction, was showing signs of drug seeking, admitted that he liked to push propofol. That in and of itself was dangerous. Then giving the propofol in the bedroom setting, not knowing how to do CPR versus rescue breathing. All of those bigger questions don't involve the timeline, but merely failure to meet the standards that an ordinarily prudent person would follow in the same circumstances.
All right, and Fitz, what Michael just laid out there, that's what the prosecution wants from the jury. That's what they want to click in. Really, the time